I thank the chair. Let me take the opportunity to thank Senator Levin for a very thorough chronology. I think it's safe to say that all of us will deal in the same time frame, though we'll choose specific areas, hopefully to highlight into detail. The work of the inquiry staff is in fact very detailed, but it's very, very helpful on many of these issues if in fact we can get as succinct answers from you on specific questions. I'd like to personally start with the period December 1999, when al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi are connected for the first time with individuals suspected in the 1998 East African bombing. It's this connection that suggests or exposes a plan to meet in Malaysia with a group of unknown individuals. On January the 5th and 6th of 2000, as we know, these individuals did meet in Malaysia. Photos were taken, numerous photos of the participants. On January the 8th, Mihdhar and al-Hazmi departed Malaysia. After several days and additional stops, on or around the 15th of January, their direction was the United States, both with valid passports, both with approved visas. Let me ask our CIA officer, were officials notified of al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi's plans to enter the United States?
As I noted in my statement, the answer to that is no. It's very difficult to understand what happened with that cable when it came in. I do not know exactly why it was missed. It would appear that it was missed completely.
The cable arrived what date?
March 5th.
March 5th. What transpired between January and the transmission of that cable being March, that 60-day period?
Maybe I misunderstood your question. I'm sorry.
You answered the question. This is a follow-up.
Oh, okay. In January, they were the Malaysia. In January, they were the focus of the operational activity until they left the country and for another country. I think it was at the 8th when the sort of crowd broke up, the 8th of January, and then there was more effort to find out what they were doing next, and then they and to understand that, but I can't deal too much in the detail between what happened between that point and further on. We had the basic visa information on Mihdhar, and that wasn't passed. And the focus is still on trying to find out what they were up to. When they arrived at the next destination, we were unable to mobilize what we needed to mobilize.
At this time, there was no attempt to put these individuals on the watch list, correct?
That's right.
No discussion. To the best of your knowledge, was the FBI ever notified?
To the best of my knowledge, the intent was to notify the FBI, and I believe the people involved in the operation thought the FBI had been notified. Something apparently was dropped somewhere, and we don't know where that was.
Was there any confusion over the connection of al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi with individuals tied to the 98 East African bombing?
There was, the reason that we were curious about them was we were trying to understand their connection to the East Africa bombing structure. We didn't know what it was. They were new players.
But we knew there was a connection.
We knew there was a connection, an impersonal connection to the bombing structure, but what you have is a hypothesis. You have the connection to a part of it, and so we have two first names, and then we go off and we try and find out more about them.
I realize that from the chronology that Senator Levin had put together. Let me ask this, though.
Right.
Was there not an active investigation still underway to the East African bombing?
Yes.
So the fact that these individuals were connected could have been and probably was pertinent to the current investigation that was triggered in 1998 with the East African bombing.
Certainly. That's why, I would submit, that's why that information was documented as having been passed to the FBI, and then I can't explain why it was not, but the intent was to pass it.
Okay, so in March 2000, we have two individuals, al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi, with known connections to to suspects of the East African bombing that have now entered the United States. They've been there for over 2 months. The FBI doesn't know that they're in the country. These individuals have not been added to the watch list. Let me ask you, Mr. Rolnice, whose responsibility is it to track and or find these two?
If we don't know that they're in the country, sir?
Correct.
If I understand your question,
It's an easy one.
we would like to have had that information. I accept the fact that someone thought that it was passed, and it would appear, based on what we know now, that perhaps it wasn't. But essentially, our counterparts, the CIA, and a number of different services, both law enforcement, intelligence around the world, with whom we work on a regular basis, if given the opportunity, would track those people.
In the absence of a verification of the transfer of this information, the answer is nobody's in charge. Is that correct? If the FBI does not know, if that information is not verified that it was transmitted to you, then in fact you can't be in charge of tracking these folks.
I agree with that, Senator, but I would also point out that on a regular and sustained basis, because of my interaction with the agency over the years and having a deputy from the agency in my section, I don't want to discount the effort that they make on a daily and regular routine basis to track people that we, the FBI, are interested in.
And I realize that our focus here is on this one instance, and
Okay.
I think we all know that there are success stories. In June of 2000, al-Mihdhar departs the United States. He applies for a new passport. He applies for a new visa into the United States, and he simply checks one box: I haven't had a visa. Mr. Kojum, is it that simple to create new paperwork, new documents, new official documents, and to receive official entry into the United States just by checking that little box, I haven't done this before?
Congressman, that's a Consular Affairs question, and I would like to ask a colleague of mine from the Consular Affairs Bureau to step up to the mic if he can.
Very quickly, if we could.
And
Mr. Chairman,
under our rules, I would like to ask if the individual on whom you're now calling would please raise his right hand. You solemnly swear the testimony you will give before the committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Would you step up to the microphone as quickly as you can?
Yes, a question, sir?
The question was, if this individual, in this case al-Mihdhar, simply checks the box that says, I've never applied for a visa, yet he had, do we have a process to search? And is it likely that that search took place in this case?
Well, we have an automated process to search to see if he had been denied a visa previously.
But if he had had a visa, yet he checked, in this particular case, in his application, that he had never applied for a visa, do we check for that?
At that time, no, there was no way to instantaneously verify.
So he created
visa before.
He created with the same name, ultimately the same birth date, an identical application. The only difference was he checked, I have never had a visa, and a passport and a new visa was processed for al-Mihdhar.
That's correct.
And in fact, he came back into the country, correct?
Yes.
If he had been on the watch list, what would have happened?
When we ran the automatic name check at the time we processed the application, the officer would have been advised by the results of that name check to defer all action and refer the case to Washington.
How about when he left the United States? If he was on the watch list, would we have caught him leaving the United States?
Well, I don't believe so, because the INS normally does not check individuals upon departure from the
Okay.
United States.
To make things worse, in July of 2000, al-Hazmi files an application for a visa extension. That extension is for 6 months. He lists his real name. He lists his Lemon Grove, California address. And that extension is granted. Am I correct?
I believe that'd be the process. Of course, that's extensions of stay for individuals already in the United States under the purview of the Immigration and Naturalization Service.
Would that extension have been approved if al-Hazmi had been on the watch list?
Well, certainly if INS had access to such information at the time they adjudicated his request for an extension of stay, I'm sure they wouldn't have.
Did INS have access at that time to watch list information?
I don't believe so, but I can't say for sure. I don't believe so, no.
The INS at this point in time did not have access to check the watch list individuals in determining visa extensions or visa.
Well, they had access to it at the ports of entry when they're inspecting the individual before admission, but this is a different process, not at the port of entry.
So an individual in the United States that's on the watch list could file for a visa extension and that extension be granted. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, again, the INS would have to provide the definitive answer because they're the agency that handles extensions of stay for individuals already in the United States.
Let me just point out to the committee and to the Joint Inquiry staff that this is something that we need a more thorough understanding. I hope that's not the case today. If it was the case then we had a tremendous flaw in our system. Let me accelerate ahead if I could to the Cole bombing in October of 2000. Is it safe to say to our FBI agent, this begins an exhaustive investigation?
Yes, sir.
In January 2001, the photographs from the January 2000 Malaysian meeting were shown to an individual who was frequented by the CIA and also by the FBI for their help. This individual identified one of the people in the photograph as, in fact, Khalid bin Atash, an individual that is now tied to playing a large orchestrating role in the Cole bombing to the FBI agent. Is that correct?
Sir, I don't know about those photographs. We had two photographs of Khalid. One was a photograph that we had derived from investigation. And I understand your concerns, and I can hear it in your voice trying to protect certain things about this with regards to source information. But that photograph, which was an identification photograph, was shown to the source, and he identified the individual as Khalid. But the two photographs, the other two photographs, are the photographs taken from prior meetings.
You're in fact correct.
We do not, I'm unaware of that, that those photographs were
Let me
shown.
ask our CIA officer if in fact that identification was made.
I don't believe this has been declassified, sir, and I have a hard time talking about this in public. I'd be happy to talk about in closed session in detail.
I will trust that you're accurate on that.
As I said in my statement, maybe I can help with the answer a bit. As I said in my statement, we had intelligence that supported the hypothesis. It was not a confirmation, it supported the hypothesis. And in fact, I would prefer to answer the rest of it in detail.
Is it in fact factual that we now have a photograph that we know one of the individuals is Atash, or an individual who orchestrated, we think, the Cole bombings?
That was a different photograph.
I realize that. I'm
A
not
different
talking
individual.
About, we have photographs that show Khalid bin Atash, as well as al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi Am I correct that
Yes, sir.
there's a photograph with all three?
Yeah.
Did any of these three go on the watch list at that time? Connections to the East African bombing by two of them and connections to the Cole bombing by a third. Did any of the three go on the watch list?
From what occurred, there actually, it turns out there's, and I know my CIA colleague doesn't want to get into it too much. There's a little bit of confusion. There were 4 photographs that were taken out of a certain operation.
Sir, this shouldn't be talked about in public. I'm sorry. It should not be. It's not, we can't go there.
I will move on.
I apologize, but we just can't.
Congressman, if need be, we will arrange to have the further exploration of this in a closed session.
I thank the chairman. I will move forward. I think there's some confusion about specific photographs, and I'm certainly not trying to go to any that aren't already known and part of in fact, the joint inquiry investigation. But because there's confusion, let me move forward for the purposes of all the members. The fact is that at this period, though, we still have 3 individuals that are targets of investigations, are connected to investigations that are not on a watch list.
That's correct.
Let me go to Mr. Kojim again. At this period, between the bombing of the USS Cole, but prior to September the 11th, do you have any idea how many people went on the watch list?
I believe that information is in Ms. Hill's statement, and if that can be passed to me, I can provide that to you.
While he's looking for that, let me move forward to May 2001. This I am told that the May 2001 meeting between the CIA and the FBI, where they shared photographs, is in fact an area we can go to. Would the CIA agent agree? Thank you. Was there any discussion or questions relating to al-Mihdhar or al-Hazmi at this meeting on May 2001 when these photographs were discussed? And let me ask Mr. Rolnice that.
I don't have the substance of exactly what was discussed in that meeting, sir. I don't know if al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi were in fact topics of that meeting or not.
Do we have anybody here that was a participant in that meeting?
To the best of my recollection, I believe I probably helped to organize the meeting. I don't remember if I was there or not, but the purpose was to start going over the FBI had some leads that they were interested in checking in the course of the Cole investigation, and so the Mihdhar and Hazmi thing resurfaced, and this was the beginning of the discussion between the FBI and the CIA that led to sort of the work between them to resurrect the file, which had been dormant.
On June the 11th, 2001, the CIA went to the New York office of the FBI and in fact passed on to New York agents who led the Cole investigation. Or am I correct?
Yes, sir.
As, again, these photographs were shown and discussed, the records show that Mihdhar's name did come up, yet we're unclear in the context that it came up. Can you help to clarify that at all?
Yes, sir. When these photos were shown to us, we had information at the time that one of our suspects had actually traveled to the same region of the world that this might have taken place. So we pressed the individuals there for more information regarding the meeting. Usually, what I found is coincidences don't occur too much in this job. Usually, a lot of times, when things are the way they are, it's because that's pretty much the way they are. So we pressed them for information. Now, the other agents in the meeting recall they don't. One agent does not recall the name being given up in the big meeting. There were numerous sidebars that happened. Regardless of that, at the end of that meeting, some of them say it was just because I was able to get the name out of the analyst. But at the end of that day, we knew the name Khalid al-Mihdhar, but nothing else. The context of that meeting was we continued to press them on 2 or 3 times on information regarding why were you looking at this guy? You couldn't have been following everybody around the millennium. What was the reason behind this? And we were told that that information, as I recall, we were told that information could not be passed and that they would try to do it in the days and weeks to come. And the end of that meeting was, I wouldn't say it was very contentious, but we certainly were not very happy. The New York agents at the time were not very happy that certain information couldn't be shared with us.
In an effort to acknowledge to the chair that I see that my time has expired, with the indulgence of the chair, if I could use the opportunity to cover several more points without asking questions. It would be a very brief thing. On July the 13th, I think it was an important day because, in fact, our CIA officer began to put some of the pieces together that had bugged him. And that led to finding some of the lost cables or the misfiled cables. That led to decisions that did put people on watch lists, decisions that did begin the ball rolling towards an all-out press by the Bureau to look for individuals that, for numerous reasons, we had not been able to raise to this profile at that time. But yet, in this period, even with the efforts, we overlooked simple things, like the fact that on the application extension, al-Hazmi had put his real California address, a starting point that might have led us to his movement somewhere else in the United States and potentially where he was in that 2-week period. It's important that we remember that our CIA officer said in his testimony that this had to do with the threshold for entering names on the watch list. And I think it's incredibly important that everybody within the community, everybody who has the ability to enter a name on the watch list, understand what that threshold is. And if it's so damn high that what we've looked at in this investigation doesn't trigger getting over that wall and putting the name on, then that may have been the first mistake in this overall process. Mr. Chairman, you have been very generous with your time. I thank the witnesses for their willingness, and I hope that the other members can get into more detail of the last several months.